Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, and thanks for giving us your time today. In case you're new here, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtualreality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers. Thank you to my founding members, paid subscribers, sponsors, and the donations I've received supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Evan Sitler-Bates. Why don't you introduce yourself, Evan, and tell us where you're tuning in from today?
Yeah, Ian, thanks for having me. Like Ian said, Evan Sitler-Bates. I'm the co-founder and CEO of XpertVR, and I'm tuning in from Kitchener-Waterloo here in Ontario, Canada. And it's so cool to be on the show, Ian. I've been following your journalism for many years now while being in the VR space, so it's great to be chatting.
Why don't you tell us about what you do?
Yeah, so at XpertVR, we've kind of done a little bit of everything, but back over COVID, and we can get into the story more, but back over COVID, we built out our first pre-service fire simulations for firefighting students at different colleges to allow them to experience firefighting while they were at home during COVID. And through that experience, we learned so much about firefighting, and now that's become our bread and butter. That over the past 6 years, we've developed out a whole suite of firefighting simulations so that both pre-service students, but as well veteran firefighters, new recruits, and really everybody in the fire service can jump in and experience different types of fires that they might not be able to train for in the real world.
So why don't you tell me who your customers are a little bit more? How many different groups have used your simulations at this point?
Yeah, so we're actually working with hundreds of different fire departments now. We've had thousands or tens of thousands of firefighters go through our simulations. Our biggest individual fire department is San Diego Fire. We've been working with them for almost 3 years, and they've done some incredible deployments and kind of set up our other customers for success on how those deployments work. And then our biggest client in general is the Ontario Fire Marshal here in Ontario, Canada. So they train all of the fire departments across the province. There's 437 of them. So they're using our software to train on lithium-ion fires, whether that be laptop or a phone or an actual electric vehicle or semi-truck that's transporting raw lithium. So they're touring that around the whole province, training with all of them.
And then let's walk through what the simulation actually entails. I remember at the launch of one of the Vive headsets, I was at CES, and I think they had a fire suit that actually got hot. And I remember a hose also that would really give you real resistance. People don't really recognize, unless they've actually served or been a firefighter, how strong the water jets are when they come out of those hoses. Forget having to carry a ladder or tools to break through walls and that sort of thing. Just the water coming out of the hose is a hard thing to do physically. And then there's just a lot of other things involved in the practice of fighting fires. So how real does it get? And walk me through what the simulation actually is.
Yeah, a couple of things to touch on there, but first to your point about the hose, our whole team, including our development team, has gone through some live firefighter training, and that was also one of the pieces that surprised us most when we went to a fire department and got to play with the hose and try it. Basically, firefighters are down on one or two knees, and then as they need to advance, they walk with one leg and drag the other one behind them so that they can pull the hose properly. And that moment when you go to stand up a little bit to move forward with the hose in your hand and your body just doesn't move at all and you're like, oh, I need to really engage my muscles, was just so eye-opening for us. That said, the simulation that you're talking about is one of our competitors, and we love them because they're doing some really cool stuff on that physical side with the full vests and with the hose. But we've actually kind of taken a step back. We've realized from working with thousands of firefighters, we've realized the feedback is, hey, VR isn't going to teach us those physical things. Obviously, it's great to have the heat. It's great to have some hose resistance, but the expense that comes with that hardware can limit it. So a lot of fire departments can't get in there. And at the end of the day, they know that fires are hot. They know how to roll out a hose and start just spraying trees in the back of their station and practice those hose movements and those sorts of things. And those things need to be done physically. What we found is the soft skills, the recognizing of what type of fire this is, and the strategy and the tactics around that fire is where our simulations are being used. So basically, we put up to 21 firefighters into VR headsets, all wireless. We work with Pico, Meta, and others. They put on the headset, and now they're in front of a real fire ground as if they were actually there in the real world. And they have to go around and they have to do what they call a 360, where the incident command officer walks around the whole building and identifies things to tell their firefighters before they go in there. Then they have to do proper radio communications as they're entering the building, as they're finding patients, as they find the seat of the fire. And so it's all those communication pieces and everything that goes on there. And then on top of that, we have our instructor layer so that somebody can actually be watching the simulation as it's happening and either just taking notes and giving directions or throwing curveballs at people if they want to increase the size of the fire or they want to have part of the building collapse, so they have to throw ladders to get out one of the windows, or if they want to tow a vehicle out of the way, turn off utilities, all these sorts of things. So it's basically recreating that full fire ground for them to use in whatever way they need to train on strategy and tactics.
Has there been resistance to adopting this sort of training? What are the reactions on the side of the firefighters as you sort of pop out a headset in front of them and say, hey, put this on?
Yeah, there's always resistance, especially a couple of years ago. There was a ton of resistance. It usually comes from veteran and older firefighters that are like, no, we've trained X way for 50 or 100 years. Why would we change that training today? The thing that we found is once you get somebody into a headset and you show them that this isn't about that physical training and we're not replacing live burns, we're giving you the sets and reps that you can do on a daily or weekly basis between live burns and other live training, it very quickly changes people's perception. I would say that going to fire departments and training with thousands or tens of thousands of firefighters at this point, by the time people get into headsets, it's like a 0.001% of people that are still pushing back on it. The vast majority of people get into a headset and they're like, okay, I see how realistic the visuals are. I see how the communication and tactics need to work. And I can see how this fits into training between our live training.
Do you have any data about the efficacy of this work? How do you know whether it's successful?
Yeah, we're helping run a couple studies right now. So we don't have data on our own simulations just yet. That being said, some of our competitors have done research and they have found that the retention is much higher within virtual reality and the things that they learned. One of the studies actually compared new firefighters that are in their 20s, have played lots of video games, getting into VR simulations versus veteran firefighters getting into the simulations. And they found that both of them were able to pick up the controls at a relatively similar pace, just because virtual reality is kind of different from video games in a way. And at least with our simulations, we're limiting those controls. So you get in there and it kind of becomes natural of what you would do in the real world. You just need to learn the locomotion. And beyond that, it's kind of like, okay, this is me picking up stuff and moving throughout the environment just as I would in the real world. And there also is data on how it decreases injuries and issues that may arise either in training or in the live world as well.
Got it. All right. Well, let's go to the two questions that I ask all my guests, and then we'll come back to understanding more of the firefighting. So how did you get into VR in the first place? What was your first VR experience?
It was 2015. I live in Kitchener-Waterloo. For those familiar, it's where BlackBerry was originally born. So there is a big innovation tech scene here. And there was a company that unfortunately went under last year, but called Control V. And they set up their first VR arcade here. They kind of exploded across North America after that. And yeah, I went into the arcade. I can't even remember why. I think I just thought it was a cool experience. And the interesting part is I took my dad with me, and my dad just turned 69 a couple days ago. So he was late 50s, I guess, back then. And we went in and he picked it up as quickly as I picked it up. And we were playing games together and going through this. And I think that experience really unlocked something in my brain, because throughout my whole childhood, I didn't have many video games, but at one point I had a PlayStation 2 and then got a Wii, and my dad was horrible at all video games, no matter what, even Mario Kart and just steering the wheel. But getting into virtual reality, he was like, oh yeah, I picked this up and we're playing games together, we're having snowball fights or we're racing, and there was all sorts of things. And that experience was just so fun, seeing virtual reality actually come to life, something that I've kind of dreamed about for years as a kid, but then also seeing it with my dad and being able to have that experience and see how quickly both of us picked it up was awesome. And it was very shortly after that I went to my now business partner, Drew. We were both in the same incubator at university working on separate businesses. And I was like, hey, let's buy a VR headset. So we bought the first HTC Vive and started playing around with it throughout 2016 and just trying out all sorts of different things. And now I'm still addicted to VR and running XpertVR.
Tell me how you weathered the VR winters here and what kind of future where you think we're set up for here.
The past 3 years has definitely been stressful. I think training has now found its spot in virtual reality, where consumer VR continues to be in this VR winter, and understandably so. But I think that we're at a point where us and so many other companies have proven how VR can be used in training, and there are case studies out, there are actual publications and white papers out that study the data behind them. We were at FDIC this year. It's the biggest North American firefighter conference, and we were there 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, people would walk in and they would be like, I can't see this ever being used in the fire service. We need to have hands-on training, and a lot of pushback. Whereas this year there were people coming over and they're like, yep, I've heard that X, Y, and Z fire departments are using this, or I've read this study. I want to get VR. I just need to decide which vendor I'm going with. So I think there's been a big education over the past couple of years, even though it has been kind of a VR winter. There's been a lot of education for trainers and enterprise organizations of where this technology can be useful. The price point side of things is definitely still a concern for at least fire departments. I think a lot of organizations maybe aren't as price sensitive, but when it comes to fire departments, a lot of them are volunteer or fully funded by raffles and public events that are going on. So they can have a hard time justifying it. And that's where we've kind of slimmed down the hardware and really reasonably priced our software, at least we believe, and from what we've been told, so that anybody can adopt it. And with that on the hardware side, like I mentioned, we're not using those heat vests or the hose and those other accessories. Basically, we have a nice Nanook case that has all your headsets, has some Bobo battery straps on there, and you got your laptop and routers so that you can control everything within a local area network and don't need internet connection. I think there's been a lot of usability progress over the past couple of years. It is bulky. Being able to see people, I agree, can be an issue. My business partner will be the first one to say that I've punched him a couple times while in VR. But in general, people are putting on headsets for the first time and powering them on and able to get into our applications and able to move throughout those applications with little to no direction from us. And huge kudos to Pico and Meta and others for making those advancements and making it easier to get in, at least when you're in a kind of kiosked and MDM type of situation.
So let me ask you the other question that I ask all my guests. What has been your favorite moment of presence in a headset?
I could give you the business answer of seeing somebody else in there in the firefighting space. But for me personally, I think it would be Population One. Me and my business partner lived together with a good friend after university. So it was three of us in this tiny apartment. Our friend literally slept in the living room to save on rent. But almost every night for the first 6+ months of Population One coming out, all of us were in headset with like maybe a meter of space each in that living room playing VR. So many great memories playing with them. But especially I remember one time where all three of us were running around and we heard some people in a building and they hadn't heard us. So we like lined up by the door and one of us broke down the door and then the other two ran in shooting. And just that memory of like the communication and the planning around that attack and how it felt breaking down the door and then running in just has always stuck with me as just such a great memory of friendship and playing in VR.
I love that. What a great story. Let's go back to firefighting. I got to lay this out for our audience a little bit. There's another part of VR that I'm super curious about. It's going to upset some of my listeners, I suppose, to get into this a little bit. But the idea of military uses of VR is disturbing to a certain segment of the audience out there. But there's all sorts of reasons why you might want to have a VR equipped person in your squad controlling a drone, looking over the landscape to see if there's any enemies out there, try to surprise you. And you could have someone in VR headset at the back of the squad sort of controlling assets around you and keeping this group protected. But that's just one aspect of where I'm going with this. The other aspect of it is when you start combining the imagery of many different cameras as well as the sensors on the headset, you can basically give people X-ray vision. I've experienced this to some extent in a headset like the Apple Vision Pro, where the headset is kind of always doing mapping. And there's a couple apps that sort of access that mapping layer and visualize it for you. So there's a few moments where you can show your mapping data even when you can't see it visually. So like flip off the lights in your room after you've given the Apple Vision Pro a good look at your environment. And suddenly you can see all of the walls floating, around you, even though your eyes couldn't actually see them. And it ends up feeling exactly like X-ray vision. Well, you take this a few steps further and you can imagine a firefighter walking into a building and basically having the fire spots where they should be aiming the hose at highlighted for them. Or just like Tony Stark, Iron Man, and those sorts of things, seeing people highlighted for them that might be in the building and they need to go to those positions, or weak points in the floor, or doorways that they can't visually see because it's just billowing smoke, highlighted and all that taken away because they can see through all of that through the headset. So it's perhaps one of the most exciting uses of VR to me, the idea of saving lives that otherwise might have been missed, right? Minutes lost or water not put in the right spot at the right time, because visually there's a limit to what a firefighter can see in that sort of scenario. How far off are we from these types of scenarios happening in the real world, and what sort of roadblocks need to overcome for us to achieve sort of not ending lives like the military scenarios might be dealing with more, but literally saving lives because people can see things that they can't if they just had this bulky gear on and smoke in front of their eyes?
Yeah, great question. And I will say we're starting to work in the defense and military space a little bit more around the training side, or all around the training side. And what we're currently looking at is like training firefighters. So, hey, if you're in a submarine and there's a fire, you should know how to put out that fire. All maritime sailors need to have some sort of firefighter training. So that's kind of where we're looking right now, then other areas in defense as well. But back to your question, obviously, Andrill came out with a demo a few months ago of their kind of X-ray vision and how that could work in a headset. From my understanding, there was a lot of debate online of how realistic it is, how operational it actually is right now. But I think that's a great example of what you're talking about and could be interesting. Obviously, would love to actually see that prototype out in the real world and see how it actually works and performs in all sorts of conditions, but is very interesting. On the firefighting side of things, there's another company out of Ontario, Canada, out of Hamilton, about an hour from me, and they're called Longan Vision. And there's another company out there that competes with them called Quake Technologies, or I think they work together on some projects. But basically, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's a strap or a piece of technology that straps onto your normal firefighter helmet and then allows you to use thermal imaging cameras to see through the smoke and to see people or other things. They also have some heads-up display, so you can get text messages. If it's way too loud, you can have the text pop up, and they have voice to text, so you can text back to your commanding officer that's outside. And yeah, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, it's a really great product. The only hurdle or roadmap goes back to what we were talking about of the hardware still being bulky. When a firefighter's putting on their gear, normally it's about 80 pounds of gear with their turnout, jackets, pants, overalls, with their helmet, their SCBA tank, etc. So to add even more weight on top of that, and especially onto somebody's head, is going to wear people down when they're trying to fight a fire and run throughout a building and move with the hose lines.
A lithium-ion battery, taking a lithium-ion battery into a fire doesn't sound like a good idea.
That as well can be interesting. So yeah, from my understanding, like I'm friends with Enzo, the CEO there at Longan, and have tried out their headset as it's evolved, and it's definitely gotten much better balanced on the head of how they've moved stuff to the back, so it balances out a little bit more. And from what they've told me, all of the tests that they've done, they have it very much controlled so the lithium doesn't get heated up and you don't cause another fire on your head. So yeah, really cool product, and basically can do what you're alluding to there. It just obviously needs the hardware to get slimmer and price come down at the end of the day.
Is there anything else about your work that you want our audience to know here today?
Number one, like I said at the start, we're not trying to replace live burns and live training, but in a sense, we're adding to that live training, because for the best firefighters in the world, New York, San Diego, Chicago, etc., they have these multi-million-dollar training facilities that are incredible, but they can't simulate a lithium ion fire. They can't simulate all sorts of different hazardous materials that could be leaking, because to simulate it, you're not going to get the same visuals and smells, etc., in the real world. So bringing that into virtual reality is where we've seen a huge benefit for firefighters, where they can see what does a lithium ion fire look like and actually look like, and not just one Tesla, but being able to switch through a bunch of different cars, a bunch of different types of batteries, and see all those things in virtual reality, coordinate with their team and fight those. So yeah, just for any firefighters out there listening, that side is where we've seen huge benefits of being able to access different hazards that even the multi-million-dollar facilities can't access or show off. And then number two, I think I already touched on it, but a big part of our work is how can we support firefighters and make sure that they're safer on the job. So we're always working to make sure that, number one, our pricing is reasonable so that they can get in, but we're also working with all sorts of different grant committees and government funding so that the smaller fire departments can get access to this. So for any firefighters or anybody that's listening that knows a firefighter and is like, oh, we're in a rural town or volunteer area, please reach out. I'm always happy to chat. We're seeing a lot of these grants go out, and we're also seeing a lot of larger departments sharing their hardware and our software with volunteer departments that are nearby them. So there's a huge community aspect to this, both on sharing the resources as well as sharing feedback so that we're continuously improving our simulations. So yeah, if anybody's out there, please reach out, and happy to just chat and let you know what's going on in the VR XR space when it comes to firefighting.
Where would they go to get in contact with you?
Yeah, XpertVR.com or .ca. That's without the first E, so XpertVR.com or .ca. And then me on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on there and always respond to every message and connect with basically anybody that reaches out, unless you're marketing a salesperson that's really aggressive when they reach out. But yeah, just Evan Sitler-Bates on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for the time, Evan. We'll talk to you in the future, and good luck with the rollout here.
Thank you.